It was clear to me in only a few miles that the Anta Zone 2 was a fantastic shoe. But will it slow you down?
We're out in the Anta Zone 2 in the winter wonderland. It has not melted at all, and seeing as it is unlikely to melt until something like April, I am obligated to take this shoe for a run in the conditions that we have, and that's okay. I'm pretty used to it at this point. It's been a really rough winter, and I've just grown accustomed to it. So I did... Before we begin, I did actually take this for a treadmill run yesterday and enjoyed it. I have a lot of thoughts to share about that, but I didn't want to make the review based on simply one treadmill run. I'm trying to avoid doing that because if I could fall into that trap, I would do it all the time and I would never run outside in this Arctic wasteland. But it's good for you to get outside and breathe the cold air and feel it pumping through your lungs. And yeah, sure. I'm gonna tell myself that. Alright, let's go. You know what this compound feels the most like? The Neo Zen, which gives me great joy and great trepidation because for me, the foam in the Neo Zen failed very quickly at around like 150 miles. I think I took it up to 200, but yeah, the foam has that same like really nice sink in, like very soft, and yet somehow it's still rebounding in the same way that the Neo Zen made me scratch my head. It's like, how is this actually reforming its structure when it's this soft? So that's what I'm getting right now from the foam. The outsole is not loving what the world is given, but I don't know if that's a universal thing for all outsoles right now, because the conditions have changed to this like greasy, post-salted muck slush, and the sidewalks are even worse than the road itself, and so I don't really have much options right now for running. This might be the only stretch of road I could run on. So like 3/4 of a mile back and forth for 10 miles doesn't sound like my idea of a picnic, but that's probably what I'm gonna end up doing. I got this shoe in a 9.5, partially because of how similar it is in design to the C2027, and I wanted to see what going down half a size would be like. Not because the C2027 didn't work in the size that I had, but because it was slightly roomy, and I thought maybe I could get away with a 9.5 in this, but that was not the right decision. I'll talk more about that in the fit section. get from TPE foams that I'm getting from this going down a hill. It's the way that it compresses under extreme force. It feels like a tectonic plate wobble, like a little bit of back and forth in the X plane. And I don't get that from ATPU, EVA, any other foams. It's really only been in like Dynafishanian, Evo SL, this a little bit. And I don't know if this is a TPE or not, because before I was comparing it to the Neo Zen, which is expanded TPU, I believe. So, but at slower efforts or less impact driven efforts, this does feel like the Neo Zen. Like right now it feels more like the Neo Zen than it does the Evo. But coming down that hill, it's like an unmistakable feeling. And maybe it's not down to the foam type, but the amount of like gas in the foam, I don't really know. That's what I was feeling. I'll hit you with a quick recap. We're gonna break it down in more detail in a little bit. This is not a Zone 2 shoe. I was blasting once I found some dry pavement, or like somewhat dry pavement. I was just going for it. I had a couple really fast miles, and I was stop and go with the camera and such, so I don't really even know what my pace is. I haven't looked, but we'll dive into that a little more later. But the things that I noticed about it is, yes, I think I probably should have gotten a 10 instead of a 9.5. Again, reminding everybody that I am between sizes, so that's not to say that your true to size wouldn't work, but it's on the snug side of true to size. Wow, there's a tractor coming through. It's pretty crazy. I don't know if you can see that, but that's a whole big old tractor. Thank you so much. Thanks, man. Like I said, a tractor. What a hero. What a total hero. That's freaking awesome. That's the first time I've ever seen that in my life in Rochester. I've never seen anybody outside of the U of R plow the sidewalks. That's so cool. I'm so grateful for that. I mean, granted, it's not like they're actually plowed, but it's better than they were, for sure. Because you have jerks like me running in the road, creating chaos, and drivers start honking and swearing at you. But yeah, this didn't feel like a Zone 2 shoe. This felt like it was proper quick. And like, I mean, maybe a little bit too soft to be a race day shoe. But it's not, I wouldn't say it's all that different from the Adios Pro 4 or the Dynafish Xiaonan. So I could see this being like a race day, if you were a pacer type of shoe, like a trainer that's good enough to like be enjoyable over the distance. At first I was not thinking I would take this for a long run. I'm still not sure due to the sizing, but I had more of an issue with the sizing yesterday on the treadmill, which I often do. If it's narrow on me, any shoe, then the treadmill will exacerbate that, and that's what I was experiencing yesterday. But yesterday I had the same experience with the speed capability of it, where it was like proper quick on the treadmill. I ended up doing a progression run. I don't know how fast I got it, but it was not slow. It was like 8.5 was the end of the progression in treadmill units, which is miles per hour, which I think is like, I don't know, somewhere around low 7s. I could see the sun. That's really nice. It's a nice day. I'm gonna get back to work, and we're gonna take this back to the studio.
And we're back in the studio with the Anta Zone 2, and that was a very back and forth run. I went probably 1 billion times back and forth on the same stretch of road, and maybe lost my mind a little bit along the way. But I'm here to discuss the Anta Zone 2, also known as the Anta LSD. And the idea behind this shoe, I believe, based on the name of it, is to be a slow long run shoe. I will, in due course, of course, address that claim, right? The claim to its namesake. But first, let's take a look at the specs and materials. Okay, so there's a little bit of information on the shoe. I'm sure more will become available as this becomes available in the Western market from Anta on the US website. For now, though, I'm stuck with kind of conjecture because I got this off a third party reseller on Taobao, and they just don't have any stats that I could personally find. So the way that I'm going about getting the stats on this is from the Anta C2027 because they are identical molds. And this is something that I'll break down in more detail when I put the two of these shoes head to head, which should be coming up fairly soon. They are such similar shoes in their geometry and their design, in their upper. I mean, they're really, really similar. This is basically the C2027 without a plate and with a different foam. So that said, stack height is 34 down to 28 for a 6 mil drop. That's what it is in the C2027. I believe that this is the exact same. The weight, on the other hand, is radically different. Came in at 191 and 188 grams on either shoe. And so that's just crazy. That's lighter than the Dynafish Jiaonian. Now, a caveat to that, this is a size 9.5 versus I got the Jiaonian in a 10. So not a perfect comparison there, but those are also two shoes that I will be comparing the Anta Zone 2 and the Jiaonian at some point in the future because I do think there's a lot of similarities there. And then this was $72 retail, plus probably around 20 to 30 shipping, which makes this about $100 out the door, which is incredible value. I mean, of course, obviously, ordering shoes from China, you're going to have a higher value proposition, but this is with pretty extreme tariffs, with shipping costs, with all of the issues of living in America as a running shoe consumer, trying to order from a Chinese website, it still was very, very cheap. And yeah, I bought this at the same time as the Leaning Red Hair 9 Ultra. So I'm averaging the shipping costs between the two because that was what it was. It was like $40 for shipping for both of them. And so something like 20 to 30 for each. I can't remember if it was 40 or 60. But Taobao, the reason it's confusing sometimes is the shipper, Kainiao, issues a refund after you receive your product for the actual amount that shipping costs. So I believe this came out to be about $100 is the upshot. A little bit more on the specs. The upper is, again, very similar to the C2027. It's nothing special. The heel counter is not the most rigid, but it's definitely got some structure to it. There's padding on the back, sufficient, more than enough padding in my view of shoes. Companies have really figured out how to make a heel padding these days. It's hard to mess it up, and whenever it is messed up, it's a pretty big deal. So this is fine and good. And the midsole is the big question mark. Now, it's their nitrogen N90 foam, which is the highest energy returning foam. This gave me well, I'll talk about that in the feel section. So I don't know exactly what it is, the compound that's in the midsole. If I had to guess, I would maybe say it's TPE, but it's less certain of a statement than I am of the C2027. That feels very much like a TPE. This feels similar, but there's some, I'll get to that in the field section. Yeah, laces are fine. There's nothing remarkable about them. The outsole was its CPU, and it was not quite the grippiest, but I was also testing it today in pretty extreme conditions. So with that, let's talk about the fit. The fit is kind of important because I wanted to do some experimentation with Anta's shoes since I have the C2027, and even visually they looked so similar even before this arrived. I figured I was getting pretty much a shoe that was built on the same last. And I had a little extra room in the C2027 and a 10. And I was wondering maybe if a 9.5 would be better for me in Anta. Not the case. I should have gotten a 10 in this, but I was doing this to test both for you all to see what an appropriate fit might look like if you're between size, and for me because I was simply just curious. I'm a curious guy. So this is a 9.5. The way that it manifested as too small for me is the big toe on my right foot, which is my bigger foot, got a little bit of not quite bruising, but I felt it on the treadmill. And that's typically where I'll feel that type of sensation most keenly, is on a treadmill. And I did do a treadmill run in this yesterday. I took this outside today. That was greatly diminished today to the point of not even being really noticeable at all. So this does fit. It gives me, it's too narrow in the forefoot for me in a 9.5, but only barely. So if you're in between sizes, I would say go to the higher size that you go to. But if you run in a size that is your true to size, that's the size that you should go with for sure. Otherwise, this fits great. I mean, it had great lockdown. There was nothing like, this was a self-imposed problem, so it's hard to really fault the shoe for something that I deliberately decided to take a risk on. So that's the fit. Now we're gonna go to the ride. And this is where, I mean, of course, with any shoe, things get interesting. But what was so interesting about the ride on this shoe is that it didn't, to me, want to go slow. There was nothing slow about this. It was all about the explosive, rubbery foam that was also very soft. So I could see why maybe, it's comfort oriented in a way, but when you have such a energetic foam that wants to propel you forward, it's like, it's not really a slow day shoe for me personally. I would not take this deliberately trying to run slow. Now, this is still early days with this shoe, but do I think that this will allow me to go into slower paces a little bit more confidently than something like the Evo SL? Yeah, probably. I think that this is capable of that lower end a little bit better, and I think it's a more flat geometry. I'm not saying it's a flat geometry. There is a bit of a pronounced rocker up here, but not quite the same early stage rocker as you would find in the Evo SL, or particularly in the Dynafish Xiaoyan. And both of those shoes have this like relentlessness of carrying you forward and on and on and on that I think pushes the pace a bit without pushing the pace too high. And I don't think that the Anta succumbs to that, but I also think that that requires you to work maybe a little bit more mindfully on your stride than the Evo or the Xiaoyan. And we're going to be in the those two shoes conversation for the majority of the field, because it was sort of a mix between those two shoes plus the C2027. So like Anta's design and geometry, and yeah, just like their whole shoe philosophy, how they're designing their shoes, then with properties of the Evo and the Xiaoyan. So the foam, let's talk about the foam. That's the most important thing. It felt like a TPEE when I was going down hills. And this is something that I mentioned on the run. But when I go down hills in a lot of shoes, there's different sensations in the heel. It could be really dampened. It could be very much like a familiar feeling to what I would feel in the forefoot when I'm running on a flat surface. And it could also feel like this, which when I heel stomped coming down a steep hill, the extreme impact led to this like very like minimal like heel sort of, I hesitate to call it wobble, but there's like a reverberative, non-plated reverberative sensation that I've only really gotten in the Xiaoyan and the Evo SL, right? Both TPEEs. So That's why I'm leaning towards it being a TPEE compound, but it's really soft. It's at least as soft as the Adios Pro 4. Sort of at the beginning of the run, it really felt like the Neo Zen from Mizuno, which I haven't run in a long time, but that's what just came rushing to me initially. So, and that's not a TPEE. So I don't know what compound this is. I wouldn't be surprised if it were either the same-ish compound that was in the Neo Zen or the a TPEE, and I think that we're gonna see over time based on how durable it is and how much the midsole holds up to higher mileage, right? Other things about this shoe that I noticed, it's reasonably flexible, but not crazy. I don't know if there's a shank in here to stabilize the foam. Like I said, there's not really a lot of information available online, and I have not watched anybody's review on this. I was really good about trying to avoid my opinion getting influenced on this, so I'm going to probably go, after making this and editing it and posting it, I'm going to go through and see if I could scour the review space for a bit more information on the shoe. And I'm curious to see what other people thought of it, because I really did not think of this as a Zone 2 shoe at all. I thought that this was a pretty darn quick shoe for what it was, and I'm excited to put it head to head against the Xiaonian, because I think that's the most similar underfoot feel that I'm getting, with a very different geometry. Like, this doesn't feel as floaty boaty as the Xiaonian, but the weight on this is crazy. Now, it probably would be over 200 grams if I had gotten it in a 10, and that's the same size as the Xiaonian, and that's 200 grams. But the fact that these companies are coming out with these trainers that are 200 grams, and then there's like Western counterparts like Brooks releasing a shoe like the Glycerin Flex that weighs a small elephant in comparison. And, even if that shoe didn't feel like it on foot, it's kind of just suspicious. Like, what are we even doing in the Western market with these gigantic heavy shoes? Now, obviously, I think that not everybody wants a super ultra lightweight shoe all the time, but I'm not exactly sure why they wouldn't, because they're just better, in my opinion. It's nicer to have less weight on your foot. There's an old hiker's adage, and I don't know if this is actually true in any meaningful sense of the word, but like, a pound on your foot is 5 pounds on your back, or something of that sort. And obviously, we're not talking about pounds here on shoes, but the point being is, like, every pound or every amount of weight that you have to put onto your feet, it makes that much more, like, each step while you're hiking that much more effortful. And the same could be said about running. Now, obviously, this is not based on science, but this is something that I've long held as a sort of loosely held belief. If somebody could change my mind on that, I'm happy to change my mind. But I do feel that I have a harder time running in heavier shoes. It just requires more effort for me. And so when something this light comes out, you got to take notice of it. I mean, this is 188 at its lightest, 191 at its heaviest, right? That's crazy light for a daily trainer. This is basically, to me, like a potentially up-tempo daily trainer, maybe long run shoe, because of how nice the foam feels underfoot. And it's that light. It's like that, actually that light. So that's great. Disappointing thing on this was the traction was not good. Not like the worst that I felt, but again, these winter conditions, man, it makes it really hard to test shoes fairly. And so that's something that's really subject to change for not just this shoe, but any of the shoes that I'm reviewing over the course of the winter, because there's ice and snow and slush and mudslides on the ground, and no shoe is going to excel at that. One that was actually surprisingly impressive was the Li-Ning Red Hair 9 Ultra. That gripped way better than like any other shoe that I've tried recently. And it sort of caught me off guard, because it was actually gripping some really sloppy conditions on the ground. But most shoes, the Mag Max 2 is another standout for the winter for me. And the Adios Pro equipment, that's like up there with those. But the rest of the shoes that I've been testing this winter, they've all struggled. So this is not unique to this. to this winter and to these conditions. It's not perfect traction, but I got down to really decent paces today. Again, I forgot to look, of course, before making this video, but what are you gonna do? Things that I'm looking forward to testing more about the Anta Zone 2. They really missed an opportunity by not calling it the Anta LSD. That's marketing department errors. But honestly, these Chinese companies have some really good names for stuff. Like I really like the naming convention on the foams for Anta's shoes because it's like very simple. It's like N80, N85, N90. Bing bang boom. You know, you got your 3 tiers of foam. We don't need to faff about with calling everything nitro foam or whatever, and you don't have to have this matrix of different FF Turbo Squared, FF Blast Max, Blast Plus, Blast Eco Mode, blah. You don't need that. You just need name make sense, or you could go the route that Li Ning has gone and call everything Boom Boom Super Boom and Boom Capsule and Boom Fiber and Boom Boom Boom. That's fun. That's a lot of fun. I honestly think that the only Western brand that's done a good job naming their foam, and I know that this is polarizing, but Saucony with Incrediron. That's an incredible name for a foam that's incredible and incredulous. And that's why I think they really nailed the naming on that. But pretty much every other foam name, I guess like DNA Tuned is fine. It's very Brooks. It's like very safe name. But yeah, Nitro is a fine name, but the utilization of Nitro in every single foam, like that's no good. And then ZoomX, everything is ZoomX from Nike or whatever. I don't even know what their other foams are called. And then everything is Light Strike Pro from Adidas, no matter what Light Strike Pro it is. Like, this is what I'm saying, is at least try to make better names for your stuff. Yeah, and Anta Zone 2, even if it's a missed opportunity, the Anta Zone 2 is still a good name for a shoe. That said, to me, it is not a Zone 2 shoe. That's the answer to the question from the beginning of the video. It is too fast for that, for me. And I could see myself taking this for a long run, maybe. I think I mentioned this in the recap, but it comes down to this is a little small on me because I took a risk on sizing to tickle my curiosity, right? And I don't think it's exactly the right size. So it would be a bit of a risk to take this on a long run, see if I still have a toenail at the end of it. But I think otherwise I'd be pretty comfortable in it. And it might not even be an issue at all. So Anta Zone 2, really fantastic shoe. Looking forward to getting more miles in it. And I appreciate all of your attention to this shoe, to me, and to the world around you. And for now, until next time, stay in motion.